Hi, and welcome to Hanaz Writers Podcast. My name's Charlotte, and I work as a Year 2 teacher in a primary school in London. If you haven't heard any podcasts from Hanaz Writers before, then have a listen on their YouTube and Spotify channels. You can search for them on both websites, and you can start listening to the podcasts that they have available. As the month of April is known as National Poetry Month, in this podcast, I'm going to talk about a few ways in which you can look at a poem and analyze it to understand the meaning behind it. First, look at the title of the poem, if there is one, and then keep it in mind as you read the poem. Secondly, read the poem more than once. The first time you read a poem, you'll just try to take it all in. Some parts will make sense to you, and then there'll be different types of literary writing, or maybe a figure of speech, which you can read, but you don't just fully understand it yet. This could be because maybe they used an old saying or a phrase that's old, or it's using an unfamiliar word to you, or maybe it was written in the past, and sometimes things that were relevant then are not as relevant now. Then the next thing to do is to identify the structure of the poem. Look at what the rhyming scheme is for the poem. How is it laid out? What's the meter? What's the stanza? What's the structure of it? And then you try to identify what kind of poem you're reading. For example, a haiku poem is made up of a structure where you have one line of 5-syllable words, one line of 7-syllable words, and then one line of 5-syllable words. And for example, this one that I found is a haiku called A Morning, and then haiku in brackets. And it's written by a person called Arun Bahadur Gurung. So this is his poem, and it goes like this. Bees nudged the flowers. Babies peeped out of the nest. One fine, crisp morning. This is a simple poem. It's not too difficult to read, not too difficult to understand or decipher. It's telling the reader about what happens in the morning. The title says, A Morning. It doesn't specify what day this happens or what time of the year or when. However, the last line is one fine, crisp morning. And that tells the reader that this is a morning which is very cold, maybe. It's a crisp morning. It's not too warm yet. Maybe the sun is out. Maybe not. You're not too sure. But it's a nice morning. It's crisp and it's fresh. The fact that it's a haiku might also help you to understand the structure and understand why the words have been written the way it has been written. Remember, the first line is 5 syllables, so bees nudged the flowers. Then the second line is 7-syllable words, so you've got babies peeped out of the nest. And then the last line is 5 syllables, one fine, crisp morning. And you can then try to work out what it's trying to say. I mean, this is pretty clear. Bees nudged the flowers, so you can imagine that bees are flying around this morning. They are looking at flowers, trying to get the pollen from them, just going to different ones. Babies peeped out of the nest. Now, this one is a bit trickier because when you think of babies, you think of human babies. But they're peeping out of a nest, then you think of birds. And you think, oh, baby birds are peeping out of the nest. It doesn't tell you baby birds are peeping out of the nest because it only has space for 7 syllables of words. And that already takes up 7 syllables. So babies peeped out of the nest. The fact that it's told you they're in the nest makes you have to inference that it's not a human baby peeping out of a pram, it's a baby bird peeping out of their nest. And then the last line, one fine crisp morning, again, brings you to mind a morning that's crisp, the air is fresh, maybe it's a bit cold, but it's got a nice kind of feel to it, it's got a nice vibe, and it gets you into that mood. Oh, this is a beautiful morning, it's just nice to be out in the fresh air, and it's nice to be out. Maybe you're walking around a garden because you can see bees nudging the flowers. Birds, baby birds are peeping out of their nests. Maybe they're making little chirps and you can hear them. And it just sets you into your morning and you can visualize it. So it hasn't actually said much, but it's enough for you to inference what's happening. It's enough for you to bring to mind a visualization. It's enough for you to bring that poem to life in your own mind. The fact that it's a haiku doesn't really mean anything. I mean, poems can be written in any kind of way. This person could have written a 4-line stanza of four lines and have 2 rhyming words at the beginning and 2 rhyming words at the end. But as long as the visualization's there to help you visualize what's happening, you don't really need much other than that. And it's nice to write a haiku where, oh, okay, there's not much, but you can still visualize. It still takes you there. Another example is a limerick poem. And these are poems which have 5 lines, and they have a rhyming pattern of AA, BB, A. And what that means is the first 2 lines, the last words of those first 2 lines, AA, that means that those 2 words rhyme with each other. BB, the 2 words in the next 2 lines, so line 3 and 4, they are different to the words in the 2 in lines 1 and 2, but they rhyme with each other. So line 3 and 4 rhyme, but they're different to AA. So the AA words are different to the BB words. Then the last line, number 5, is an A, which that word rhymes with the first 2 words. And that's all that means. So you've got the rhyming pattern AA, BB, A. So it's a bit of a tricky one as well. Like limericks, you kind of tell a story. It's a bit longer than a haiku, and it has a different structure. They're usually short limericks, and they're usually funny as well. Sometimes they tell a funny joke. Sometimes they tell you about a funny event or a funny quirk of a person. So I found this limerick online. There's no name to it, so it's written anonymously. And it goes like this. A woman who lived in a house thought that she heard a mouse. She sent in her cat, thinking it would dispose of the rat, to find that it was only her spouse. So it's quite a funny limerick. It's quite ingenious. It's very simple. Again, they haven't made it too difficult to understand. There's a woman who lived in a house and she thought that she heard a mouse. Doesn't tell you where she heard the mouse, but you know, oh, there's a noise, maybe it is a mouse. She sent in her cat to dispose of the rat, so she thought her cat would go in there and get rid of this mouse. But then the last sentence is kind of the fun, and it just makes the whole limerick just nonsense, really. To find that it was only her spouse. So after all that, even though she thought it was a mouse or a rat, it was actually just her husband or her spouse or her partner, whoever, just in the next room maybe. And you can just kind of imagine this poem. There's a woman in a room, she hears a sound, sends off her cat to go and get the mouse, get the rat, and then, oh, no, it's just her husband. So it's quite a funny poem. Bit of a nonsense poem as well, actually, which is kind of what limericks are. And it's pretty easy to understand. It's pretty easy to listen to, and it's quite humorous at the end. And it makes the reader laugh, which is quite funny. So the limerick helps to make the poem rhyme. You've got your pattern AA, so house and mouse, BB, cat and rat, and then last one is an A, so spouse. And it's quite funny because limericks, they were thought to originate from Ireland and England and France during the Middle Ages. This was around the time when people would spend time in bars, and then they would have these kind of sing-alongs in bars. I don't know if anyone's ever been to a bar where they have sing-along and people play the piano and people are just singing, or they're just making up different rhymes and they sing along. And they're short, they're quirky, they're quick, they're humorous, and they're there to bring joy and be sung when drunk, basically. That's basically the past of limericks. That's all they were there for. So they're nonsensical, they're funny, they make fun of things, and it's just a nice, humorous kind of poem. Of course, there are longer poems, such as an epic poem, which I don't think I have time to read here, but I'll give you the titles of a few famous poems, like Beowulf is a good one. That's a very long epic poem, and it's about a very long story of a person called Beowulf who's had many, many different adventures. Then there's a poem called The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Again, this is about a raven and the weird quirks that a raven has. There's also one called The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. I haven't read that poem myself personally, so I'm not sure. So, excuse me, I'm not sure what it's about. So, if you have a chance to read these epic poems, I would say read them. Take your time with them because the language would be Old English. Read through them, try to figure out the structure, try to figure out what it's trying to tell you. Sometimes you can just Google the sentences and maybe Google will then bring up explanations and tell you this, what certain words mean as well. And it can also then help you to kind of read the poems and analyze them yourself. It can be difficult to analyze these types of epic poems because of this, but look at the meaning behind them. They can also be open to interpretation sometimes because remember they use metaphors, they use alliteration, and similes. So beware of that as you're reading through. Think about what the metaphor could be. What could the alliteration be? Why would they be using similes at that point in the poem? Sometimes it could just be very straightforward and just tell you he was as big as a bear. And you're like, okay, so you can imagine a tall guy who's huge and maybe a bit wide. Yeah. So sometimes it is difficult to analyze poems. Sometimes it's very easy. But at first, I would say just identify what the poem is. Identify the reason for the poem. So look at the title. Understand what the poem has been written for and why. Also look at the different types of components that have been used, the literary components used inside. If they have similes, metaphors, alliteration, onomatopoeia, and so on, read them. But then try to understand what is the poet trying to get across by using that alliteration? What is the poet trying to get across by using that metaphor? What is the poet trying to get across by using that simile, that onomatopoeia? And you can just kind of break those bits down. If you're just not sure, then just read it and just enjoy it and then move on. There's no point in getting hung up about something that you're not sure and you're just like, I don't actually quite understand it. Just move on from it because the next line might tell you a bit more information. Unless, of course, that line is integral, then maybe try to understand it. Oh, I know, poetry is hard. It can be mind-boggling sometimes. Even I had trouble, when you're trying to figure things out and you just don't get it. Sometimes it will come to you when you're not even thinking about it. You're like, oh, I understand it now. Or maybe someone else will say something to you and just trigger that moment, that eureka moment, like, oh, I get it, Sometimes analysing poems can be tricky. Sometimes they can be easy. So the two that I've picked were pretty easy reading. Pretty simple, and they kind of helped you. I think maybe start off with reading an easy poem like that and just understanding it for yourself. If you work out these kind of key ideas and then you analyze the poem and then you break it down to the metaphors, the alliteration, the similes, then you've got the gist of the poem. You at least understand what the poem's trying to tell you. And then you can overanalyze as much as you want afterwards and analyze whatever metaphors or alliteration or spellings or different types of things that has been used to make the poem fun and interesting and exciting. And that's all for this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed it. And if you'd like to listen to more, then like and subscribe to Hanaz Writers YouTube and Spotify channels. If you're interested in becoming a published author or a published poet, then please visit Hanaz Writers website and sign up. It is free to sign up, guys. You can then post your publications on there, post your writing, and you'll get feedback as soon as they can get to you. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, bye!
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and share. It really helps us out and keeps the content coming. Want to rock some awesome merch? Check out our online store, TikTok shop, or eBay page for exclusive Hanaz Writers gear. Do not forget to stay connected. Links to our social profiles can be found down below in the description. Got a brilliant idea you'd love to publish? We'd love to hear from you. Email us or visit our website at https://hanazwriters.org for all the details on how to get started. Thanks for watching and supporting Hanaz Writers. We hope to see you again soon.